missions to Zambia and to the Congo. 42 years of working behind enemy lines and focusing on restricted access areas. Africa is a great continent. We've got tremendous challenges coming up our way. According to Operation World, the number of Christians in Africa is set to double. In the next 25 years, the number of Christians in Africa is going to double from 680 million now to 1.2 billion by 2050. That will be more Christians than you'll have in the entire Northern Hemisphere, more than all the Christians in North America, Europe, and Asia combined. We might even be more than all the Christians in all other continents combined, but certainly Africa is going to have the largest number of Christians in the world. We might even become predominant. So when I was converted in 1977, that was the year that the global south overtook the global north. Christianity had been predominantly in Northern Hemisphere. 1977, there was parity, same number of Christians in the Southern Hemisphere as the Northern Hemisphere. That's now moved to 80% of the Christians in the world are now in the Southern Hemisphere, South America and Africa particularly. But that's going to dramatically increase the imbalance. The world's going to be overwhelmingly Christian in the Southern Hemisphere. So the global south is tipping the scales. And right now, we are heading to a situation where there's going to be so many Christians in Africa, we won't be able to find enough Bibles or Bible teaching for them. That's the big challenge. Africa needs more Bibles and more Bible teaching. Right now, we're told there's only 150 million Bibles and New Testaments in Africa. And that means 500 million people who call themselves Christians in Africa do not have a Bible or even a New Testament today. So the need for Bibles and Bible teaching is huge. Well, this last month, one of our missionaries, Johan, has traveled to the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And when you see the word democratic in the name, you know it's not. And Democratic Republic of Congo, the poor guys have suffered a lot there. Johan and his wife Marita have been focused on reaching the Congo for many, many years. He has a naval background. In fact, Johan Mankies was on the bridge of the President Kruger when it sank, the biggest naval disaster in South African naval history. They were doing complex, dangerous anti-submarine maneuvers at night. And the President Kruger, the pride of the fleet, the flag-bearing ship of the South African Navy, sank. And he went down with the ship and lived to tell the tale, which is quite something. Well, he's traveled to the Congo many a time, and the Congo has always been understood as one of the toughest mission fields on earth. In fact, the Congo inspired the book written in 1899, The Heart of Darkness. And that was also the inspiration for the American Apocalypse Now movie. The Heart of Darkness has been understood to be the Congo River. When Henry Morton Stanley went down the Congo River, he was involved in more than 50 major battles against cannibals and others who wanted to skin and eat him alive. So Henry Morton Stanley's book, Through the Dark Continent, is quite an epic. I've gone through it, and we've got a copy, first edition, in our display cabinets downstairs. But the Congo has been, just to give you an idea, Congo is very much central. It's the largest country in Africa right now. The largest country used to be the Sudan, but of course, we had a part in seeing that Sudan was cut down to size, with South Sudan taking independence. These are some pictures of missionaries took in the Congo back in the 1930s and 40s. You can see some of the hairstyles and face masks and witchcraft styles that used to be quite common. Now, this is 1909, this particular picture. Some of the tribal dances, clothes, outfits, interesting kinds of body modification, which is now more common in Western capitals than in Africa now, as people have returned to Christ. This looks now more like somebody in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And of course, the voodoo masks, strange hairstyles, all kinds of interesting styles, scarification. This is now not practiced in Africa much. This is historic, but it's practiced a lot in the West and in Canada and New Zealand and Australia now. And the missionaries came to the Congo in their droves, from C.T. Studd, so many others. And Congo moved from a situation where in 1900, only 1.6% of the Congo would call themselves Christians. Now more than 90% of people in Congo call themselves Christians. 1964, there was a hideous uprising called the Simbas. I don't know if they're still Africa's bloodiest rebels, but they were at the time. And the Simbas killed at least 280 missionaries, and that included Protestant and Catholic missionaries. In fact, in Stanleyville, where these characters took over in Stanleyville, they were supported by Red China. The Simbas set up an altar with a huge picture of Patrice Lumumba, who was the first communist dictator of the Congo. And the Soviets later built a Patrice Lumumba University to train terrorists in Moscow. So Patrice Lumumba was their god. They set up an altar with a big picture of him framed behind it, and on it they sacrificed missionaries. They brought out the missionaries and laid them on the altar and plucked out the beating hearts and so on. And Stanleyville was a scene of terrible slaughter. I remember as a brand new Christian reading the book Out of the Mouth of the Lion. Now Simba means lion in Swahili. And the Simba terrorists were murdering missionaries. There were hundreds of them lined up, being taken out one by one, being sacrificed in front of the Patrice Lumumba memorial or altar. And the Belgians who were responsible for the Congo, their paratroopers were late. The French Foreign Legion, they were totally late. They missed the whole thing. But South African mercenaries under Colonel Mike Hall, the Wild Geese, or Five Commando, as they prefer to be called, they came in and they rescued hundreds of these missionaries. They got to Stanleyville in time to rescue hundreds of missionaries from being slaughtered, although many had been murdered already before they got there. But total failure for the Belgian military, total failure for the French Foreign Legion, a victory for the much maligned South African and Rhodesian mercenaries under Mike Hall, Five Commando of the Wild Geese. They made a film called The Wild Geese later, inspired by those sort of things. But of course, over the years, the weapons and the uniforms have changed. But the Congo's gone through such a lot of harsh civil war. Just from 1996 to 2004, in 8 years, 4 million people died in the Congo in what was called the Great Lakes War. Some people called it Africa's first continental war. There were 12 national armies involved in the Congo, northern Congo, in what they called the Great Lakes War. Central African Republic, the Sudan Armed Forces, Zimbabwe army was there, the Angolans, even the Namibian army was in there, Tanzanians, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda. So many different countries had their armies in the Congo. Millions of Congolese getting killed. I don't think any newspaper in the world dealt with this war. And there's a good reason for it. They don't have nice five-star hotels in the northeast of the Congo. So no war correspondents were there covering this because they didn't have the kind of nightlife on when you've got no power and things like that. Most of the people in the Congo have no access to electricity or plumbing, and the situation is so bad. In the 1970s, the government under Mobutu Sese Seko nationalized all the hospitals and the schools, and so the situation is absolute catastrophe. And the situation for the people is you've got 450 ethno-linguistic groups in the Congo. That's 450 different languages and tribes. 60 million people living in the most mineral-rich country probably on the continent, if not one of the most in the world. Masses of diamonds and gold and platinum and uranium and cobalt and every kind of natural riches you could ever ask for. And the Congo River is so powerful, you could provide hydroelectric power for the entire continent of Africa just from the Congo River if you used like the hydroelectric power such as Rhodesia pioneered with the Kariba and the Zambezi. Now, in this Congo River basin, you can see the huge amounts of area that it covers. The Congo River is one of the longest rivers in the world. The Congo River has 1,735 kilometers just between Kisangani and Kinshasa, Kinshasa being the capital over here. Going up to Kisangani, which is the highest point you can go, that is, Kisangani used to be Stanleyville, and Henry Morton Stanley founded Kisangani in 1883, and they called it Stanley Falls Station at that stage. It was just by the point where you're going to have waterfalls and therefore no longer navigable, so it was the upper station of the Congo River. Now, there's 14,000 kilometers of riverbanks to reach if you count the tributaries. There's huge amounts of people there, millions of people who can only be reached by river. There's no roads, there's no airports, there's no way to reach something like 18 million people in that area. Now, we've been there and ministered in different parts of the Congo over the years, including Bill Bathman and I, ministering on their radio and TV stations, delivering the kind of technology you see in our cabinets there. These are the gospel messengers, hand-cranked tape recorders that come along with these different flip charts to equip an evangelist. Very effective. They can also be operated with solar panels. And we had our largest biblical worldview seminar ever in Elizabethville, what today is called Lubumbashi. And we had thousands of people attend our 3-day biblical worldview summit, including generals, judges, local governor, and so on. And Bishop Lumba Lumba organized this opportunity for us. And for it, we produced the Biblical Principles for Africa, translated into French. Bishop Lumba Lumba, our host, and lots of great resources for them. They launched REDEDCO, which is the Society for the Reformation of the Congo. And just some of the pictures back from the launch of this Christian Action Reformation movement in the Congo back in 2006. And good responses, tremendous potential. Now, our co-worker Johan has just traveled 5,274 kilometers. It took him 19 days to arrive in Kisangani. I was in Lusaka when I got the word through that he had arrived in Kisangani after an incredible amount of obstacles getting through roadblocks where the officials don't even pretend to be having any legal claims. You don't need to see your passport, just give us money. Just money. And they suck the country dry. The country has been looted into paralysis. And this is Kisangani. You see the headwaters of this waterfall here makes it impossible for further navigation upriver. But Kisangani, the old Stanleyville, where once 5 commando rescued hundreds of missionaries who were about to literally be sacrificed on the altar. The Congo River is a long, massive river. Sometimes it stretches, widens, I should say, to 16 kilometers wide in the rainy season. The only way you can reach most of the area in the Congo is by boat. And these communities are totally isolated except from the riverside. So this is why our naval co-worker, Johan Mankis, has got the vision of the Congo River Mission, that we need boats to go and take the gospel village by village. Huge amounts of Bible distribution to be done. Fortunately, the gospel is available in many of the languages. Now here he is distributing Heart of Man booklets, which are excellent, from All Nations Gospel Publishers. This is your local taxi. I mean, just imagine, this is how you've got to travel. And occasionally you get a ferry, and there's somebody's truck on top of this ferry, and it's putt-putting along with some diesel engine. And you've got interesting fishermen's goals of how to fish on some of the rapids, some of these unnavigatable areas where there's too much rocks, and all kinds of strange vessels you'll see on the Congo River. Of course, the river is used for everything: fishing, washing, laundry, you name it. And these are the people who need to be reached with the gospel. As Johan often says, it's only good news if it reaches you in time. And so the gospel has got to reach the people in time for them to respond. Some of the churches are quite humble affairs. Some of the schools, though, have desks and are fairly well equipped. You'll recognize the Chick publications being distributed. World Missionary Press gospel booklets always make a good impact. There's a great hunger for literature. We need to get Bibles and gospel literature to people in the field in these areas. And so continue to pray for the Congo, and particularly to Johannes. He's in the field. seeking to reach these people who are so neglected. I mean, how many people want to go to the Congo mission? And Congo is in great need, great potential. If the people just had freedom, they would have everything else, but they've not been free. For centuries, they were looted by Islamic slave traders. And then when the Belgians came in, the Arab slave trades were replaced with corporate executive greed. Some corporations really abused the people. Even though they were technically free and slavery was outlawed under the Belgians, in practice there were some corporations that were very corrupt. So they need biblical principles, just like we do. The John and Romans in French being distributed, French Bibles, Congo for Christ, Broad and Narrow Way in French. Also the people speak a version of Swahili in the eastern highlands of Congo as well. The Jesus film is a great tool. We've done lots of film evangelism in the outdoors. Even in Avira, I think when Frank was on the team there, they took out in the central intersection of Avira at night and conducted film evangelism right there, which can have great effects. Even conducted baptisms in the local lake. It's Lake Tanganyika right there. So that's just a few things to pray for on the Congo. That's Johan's report. Let me go on to our Zambia mission. Notice the fish eagle in a Zambian flag. So we've been working 42 years in the field in restricted access areas. Zambia is very well positioned. It's in Central Africa. Zambia was once part of the Central African Federation. There was Northern Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, and Nyasaland. Nyasaland is now Malawi. Northern Rhodesia is now Zambia, Southern Rhodesia is now Zimbabwe. But that was a powerful, stable economic powerhouse, and the British worked their best to destroy the Central African Federation, and Kenneth Kaunda also tried to destroy the Federation, and that's very sad, because Zambia then was destabilized. Now, they've got a great national bird. The fish eagle is the ultimate in efficiency. I've woken up sleeping on a sleeping bag on the banks of the Zambezi River to the cry of a fish eagle. You saw a fish eagle swooping down, plucking a fish just below the surface, another flap of the wings up onto a tree, having breakfast. Jesus said, "Follow me, I will make you fishers of men." And that's what we are called to do, and that's what Zambia is called to do. Zambia is definitely centrally located. When you look at Victoria Falls, you can only be inspired by this mighty demonstration of God's creation. At the point when David Livingstone found, named, mapped, measured the Victoria Falls, he said angels at creation must have gazed in flight at such magnificent sights. He said the most beautiful sights he ever saw in his life are the falls. And when you look at that, you think of the living waters, Jesus says, will flow out from an innermost being. A mighty, unstoppable river like the Zambezi. We need to be a fountain of living waters flowing to nations around that are suffering. Now, in the western part of Zambia, they've got Lozi land or Barotsi land, which is under military rule. It's effectively in a state of emergency because the Barotsi or the Lozi requested Britain to give them a protection, to make them a protectorate, because there was a lot of slavery around, and Portugal was the last country in Europe that still engaged in slavery. And Portugal was, of course, neighboring them with Angola. So the Barotsi king asked the British to please put them under their protection. Well, more accurately, asked the British South Africa Company, which is Cecil Rhodes' company, to put them under protection. And you can see in the museum, there's the law of 1906 banning slavery in Barotsi land, which came as they came under British protectorate, or British South Africa police protection, I should say. Now, the king of the Lozis made a contract. We put ourselves under Britain for protection, but if Britain is ever to leave Zambia, they must give us back our independence. We do not want to remain part of this Northern Rhodesia, or Zambia, as it later became called. Well, the British violated that rule because when they left them under the Zambians, and Kenneth Kaunda violated all his promises to recognize their independence as well. And he emphasized one Zambia, one nation, one party, one vote, one choice, all that sort of thing. So no division. But this is just the Lawsies' annual tradition of celebrating on, I don't know if this is the royal yacht, the royal raft, the royal canoe, but you can see the elephants is also one of their symbols. Well, Zambia received independence in 1964, and it was not the success story that it should have been, as you can see from this monument, with the shacks immediately to the right and so on. 1964, Northern Rhodesia was the powerhouse. Southern Rhodesia was the poor southern cousin. Northern Rhodesia was so rich, the British left £2 billion in the Reserve Bank in Lusaka. 1 British pound equaled 1 Zambian kwacha. I spoke to a man in Zambia who said, at independence 1964, he bought a car for 164 kwacha. He bought a car. And when I was there, 1 bottle of Coke, not that I drink Coke, but 1 bottle of Coke cost 10,000 kwacha. So obviously the currency went downhill. From independence, having £2 billion in the bank, you would have thought Zambia would have been a mega success story. But no, Kenneth Kaunda did everything he could to destroy the economic powerhouse of Central African Federation. He wanted to destroy the federation, and he did. Northern Rhodesia had been so effective, partnered with Southern Rhodesia and with Nyasaland, and now he turned into a one-party dictatorship, and you can see how the 1 kwacha and the 1 pound, how it deteriorated down to hundreds of kwacha to 1 British pound, and more devalued. So Zambian independence, they're approaching the 60th anniversary of independence of Zambia. 24th of October, 1964, they got their independence. So this month, Zambia will celebrate 60 years. Now, you wonder what this is. I apologize for the quality of the picture, but I took this picture through a glass casing in the museum. But you can see the massive throne here. It's like an imperial throne. That's the throne for His Excellency, the President, Kenneth Kaunda. So this is in Parliament, parliamentary desk and all this. And so he, not having the Speaker of the House in centre, but had the President's throne central, with these ivory tusks on each side. There was only one party allowed, that's United National Independence Party, UNIP. And if you had this green card, you had this membership card, that was the opening to all sorts of things. So you got one party, one choice, one candidate. That was it. And that's what they called democracy in Zambia for many years. Kaunda was dictator for 26 years in Zambia, and you had a choice. You could vote for him, or you could not vote. I mean, that's it. There was one box, one option. And people were getting sick and tired of the government of Zambia after a while. By the way, when there was a protest against Anglo-American, the Zambian police just came to the streets and shot them. Hard bullets, forget about rubber bullets or tear gas. So the workers got no chance to negotiate with Anglo-American. Anglo-American owned UNIP, and UNIP owned Zambia, and that was it. And there was no negotiations with the governments or with the Anglo-American about the prices you get paid for working in copper mines and so on. And so tremendous amounts of suffering of the people there. These are all what I see in the museum today. For 27 years, UNIP and KK have held, KK being Kenneth Kaunda. No job, no money, no food for family. And it's funny how all those great factories and industries built up over the years in Northern Rhodesia just turned to scrap iron and rust in a matter of months. The government nationalized everything, right down to hospitals and schools. And before you knew it, the powerhouse of Africa, Northern Rhodesia, turned out into being a rust bucket. Zambia became one of the poorest countries in the world. It not only was one of the poorest countries in the world, it had the most debt of any country in the world, percentage of its population. Under Kenneth Kaunda, it went down to about $110 per person per year GDP. Absolutely disgraceful and shocking to see how the great railways was destroyed, the phenomenal factories were destroyed. This is just what nationalization does. Nationalization is institutionalized envy, it is government theft, exactly what the Bible says, do not steal, do not covet your neighbor's goods. That's what they violated, because socialism is institutionalized envy and legalized theft. And witchcraft played a part too. Kenneth Kaunda was himself a Satanist, and I met with cabinet ministers, ambassadors, top leaders in a meeting in Lusaka shortly after 1991. And this one man who is Zambia's ambassador to the United Nations, he said, do you know Kenneth Kaunda used to worship Satan, and Satan would appear physically at State House? And I must have looked skeptical, and he says, I know you don't believe me. You whites don't believe us, but it's true. And all the people in the room, all cabinet levels, judges and so on, are all nodding and saying, yes, Satan would physically appear to Kenneth Kaunda, and Robert Mugabe would be there, Agostinho Neto, Samora Machel, all the dictators, they gathered together and they worshiped Satan by name, and he physically appeared to them. Now, I was skeptical. I just said at that point, well, Michael Cassidy wrote in his book that Kenneth Kaunda was a Christian gentleman. And they all laughed, the whole room. And they said, you have a problem when your ministers can't tell the difference between a Christian gentleman and a Satanist. Well, when Frederick Chiluba took power in Zambia, he called the ministers of Lusaka to come to State House to exorcise the demons and to take out all the idols and all the trappings, witchcraft that was in State House, so that he could work from there. Here I met a man who was a cabinet minister under Kenneth Kaunda, one of the veteran struggle heroes of Zambia, and he testified to me that under Kenneth Kaunda, they didn't repair any roads, they didn't build any schools, literally let the country run to rack and ruin, just looted the treasury. The £2 billion in gold in the treasury just disappeared, and the country was wrecked under Kenneth Kaunda. Now, my first exposure to Zambia was Lusaka Central Prison. I was in cell 11, about there, the presidential detainee cell, which, despite its grandiose name, was not that nice. And the only entrance was under the machine gun tower here. This shed was the cooking shed. Here was the death row, where they actually did hangings and so on. The British built Lusaka Central Prison for 80 prisoners. And for 8 months, they detained Kenneth Kaunda in this prison. Of course, when the evil British ran it, there was plumbing, electricity, people had access to a library. Kenneth Kaunda had a cell to himself. And interestingly, Kenneth Kaunda said he could not agree with his parents' Calvinist religion, because his parents believed in the depravity of man. He says, I believe in the goodness of man. I'm not a Christian, I'm a humanist. And Kenneth Kaunda made humanism the official religion, the national ideology of Zambia. And there's big posters, billboards about humanism. Well, interesting, the British gave him a cell of his own with a bed, with sheets, with pillows, with couch, gramophone, access to library, desk and chair, and 3 cooked meals brought into a cell a day. When we were there were 1,200 people in the prison, no plumbing, no electricity, no beds, no sheets, no pillows. In fact, no running water. Can you imagine? No sanitation for a prison of 1,200, built for 80. But remember, Kenneth Kaunda believes in the goodness of man. Amazing how the people who believe in the goodness of man can do such evil things. Most of the people in that prison were remand prisoners, meaning they hadn't had their day in court. Remand prisoners didn't have uniforms. They wore what was left of their tattered civilian clothes. And some people had been there 6, 7, 8 years, not had their day in court yet. Because Kaunda believed in the goodness of man. And this is what it looked like from the outside. And that's after it got released. Sure, it didn't look this good when I went there. Well, in October 1987, I and 3 other frontline missionaries were locked up as prisoners in Lusaka Central Prison. Well, Margaret Thatcher personally spoke up for us and secured our release. So here we were in Zambia. And by the way, Zambia was sponsoring and supporting wars with all of their neighbors. They had everyone from the FNLA, the MPLA, UNITA, all operating from the west into Angola, or Portuguese West Africa. They had Frelimo operating into Tet province of Portuguese East Africa. They were hosting ZANU and ZAPU, who were terrorists supported by the Soviet Union and China, fighting into Rhodesia. They hosted the ANC right into the 80s, who were bringing landmines and limpet mines and car bombs and so on into South Africa. So not to mention supporting SWAPO, who were fighting into Southwest Africa, planting landmines, killing about 26,000 people in Namibia, or Southwest Africa as it was then. So Zambia destabilized all their neighbors. And for their crimes, the Rhodesian Air Force came and bombed a bunch of bridges and did quite a lot of cross-border raids of terrorist bases in Zambia. And Kenneth Kaunda was often waving his white handkerchief, crying into his, what we called his bed sheet, which was his massive white handkerchief that he'd be crying into often about these horrible Rhodesians. No problem about the people he murdered and the missionaries that his terrorists he supported slaughtered in Rhodesia. But when Rhodesians fought back, then he was suddenly weeping and wailing, and the United Nations were issuing condemnations and so on. So Kenneth Kaunda locked up a whole lot of people here, including missionaries, and when we were taken into this prison cell, they opened the cell door, sun was setting, so they'd already locked the people up. We could be out only during when the sun was up. The darkened hours, we had to be in our cells. And so they opened the door, pushed us in and said, these are terrorists responsible for the deaths of millions. We have the brain box of terrorists. So they were literally telling the prisoners in our cell, kill them, tear them apart, no problem. Because you can imagine when you go, and what do you say after an introduction like that? Well, I preached the gospel. And I found that some of the nicest people in Zambia were in that prison cell, including people who later became the next government of Zambia. In Africa, yesterday's prisoner can become tomorrow's president. And it happened too. I didn't meet him, but Frederick Chiluba was locked up in there for being a trade union leader. I didn't meet Frederick Chiluba while there, although he was there at the same time, but I did meet General Godfrey Mianda, who was in prison for saying sanctions will hurt Zambia more than it will hurt South Africa. And so there were some fine people locked up in the presidential detainee cell without trial. Now, obviously, we didn't have cameras when we were locked up there. These pictures were taken later, because in 1991, I was invited to come back to Zambia for Kenneth Kaunda to apologize to us, and we managed to get back to the prison to preach as well. And this is a staged picture. Obviously, we wouldn't have been able to take these pictures when we were prisoners. This is what the cells were like, 60 to 65 people in a cell. Because Kenneth Kaunda believed in the goodness of man, remember? So you couldn't lie on your back. You had to lie side by side, like books on a shelf, like sardines. No running water, no sanitation, no plumbing. Can you imagine? And where the British put Kenneth Kaunda in a single cell to himself with furnishing, he could put 65 people in a cell with no furnishing, no plumbing, no electricity. And the only meal a day would be starch, what they call nsima, which we called suds in Rhodesia, what the Americans call grits, just stiff porridge. That's the only meal, one meal a day. No bowls, no knives, no forks, no spoons, literally dished onto your hands. You can eat like a dog. There's no utensils to eat with. I mean, can you imagine? Not even a leaf. Well, friends of ours ensured that the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was informed of our plight just before departure for the Commonwealth Conference in Vancouver. All these countries, and you notice Zambia's flag is the last one on the list because, that's it. And so the whole British Commonwealth gathering in Vancouver, and the chairman of the frontline states is KK, Kenneth Kaunda. Kenneth Kaunda's main goal was to attack Margaret Thatcher for refusing to put sanctions on South Africa. And so he harangued Margaret Thatcher, and he is outraged that Britain is refusing to place economic sanctions on this pariah country of South Africa. Well, Margaret Thatcher responded, why doesn't Zambia herself put sanctions on South Africa? Well, that would put many people out of work, said Kenneth Kaunda. Exactly, said Margaret Thatcher. And as South Africa is one of our most important trading partners, many British citizens would be placed out of work if I was to impose sanctions on South Africa. Quite aside from many South Africans themselves would be put out of work. She went on to explain how Zambians were completely dependent on South Africa. They ate mealie meal from the Orange Free State. Zambian Airways was maintained by South African Airways, and South African engineers serviced the engines. Zambian Railways was maintained by South African Railways, and South African locomotives pulled their freight. South African veterinarians cared for Zambia's cattle. If a Zambian got bitten by a snake, the anti-snake bite serum came from Pretoria. Hundreds of thousands of Zambians were migrant workers in South Africa, and they brought millions and millions of pounds every year into Zambia's economy, which was totally essential for this country, which had the worst debt in the whole continent, in the whole world actually. Zambia owed 166% of the gross national product. 166% debt is pretty bad. If you and I had debt like that, we'd probably be in jail. Kenneth Kaunda then declared, because of South Africa's human rights record, Britain should impose sanctions. So at this point, Margaret Thatcher produced our information. Who are you to speak about human rights abuses? You are the unelected dictator of a one-party state. You have 6 British missionaries. Now, I'm South African, but my father fought all 6 years in the Second World War in the 8th Army, and so he had a British passport and he was able to pass it on to me. And I've used that for missionary work because that gets me into countries that South African passports didn't used to open the doors for. So it was strange. The only time we ever had all 4 missionaries on an outreach in Frontline, all had British passports. One was an Australian, but he had fought in the British paratroopers in Northern Ireland, so he had a British passport. And we just all happened to have a British passport, so we were Britain's Foreign Office problem. And you've got 4 British missionaries being held without trial as presidential detainees in Lusaka Central Prison, tortured, abused by your own security forces. And Kenneth Kaunda was absolutely dumbstruck. It was a KO, knockout. The Iron Lady had won the debate. He was humiliated. And apparently his first words when he got back to Lusaka was, "Get those missionaries out of here." And so I was summoned to the machine gun tower where the grate was, and I put out my hands expecting the handcuffs. I'd had 6 previous interrogations. But instead, this man in a smart 3-piece suit shook my hand and said, "KK has ordered your release." On the way out, took me past the Freedom Monument. Not that this picture was taken on another occasion. We didn't have cameras with us, but I couldn't help but notice, why is your freedom statue behind bars? But that's very symbolic. The man up top's breaking chains, which some irreverent local people said, he's trying to bring 2 magnets together. But anyway, that's the Freedom Monument. So in 1999, KK had his lawyer contact us to ask me to come back to Zambia that they could apologize for the bad treatment we'd received. And I said to this lawyer, I know how this works. Kenneth Kaunda's in immense trouble. He's got huge amounts of popular unrest. He's extremely unpopular. He wants to use us for a public relations gimmick to improve his standing in the polls as they're approaching their first elections ever. First multi-party elections, I should say. And so Kenneth Kaunda said, basically, we let you come back. Main thing you've got to do is go on national TV program, ZNBC. Well, I said, I'll do this on one condition. I've got to be able to run an evangelistic crusade in Lusaka and must be able to get back to prison. I said, I can't go back to prison empty-handed. If I come back to Lusaka, I've got to preach in a prison, but I must bring things that my friends there need. I want to be able to bring food, vitamins, medicines, soap, pencils, pens, and a whole lot of different things that I said I had to be able to allow to bring in. And when they gave the go-ahead for that, then I agreed. And this is the TV show that we went on. And when they started, I perceived this is live. And there's the red button on, the lights come on the camera. So I took a deep breath when the lady said, this must be very different from your first visit to Zambia. And then I just went into the whole, without taking a breath. Yes, we were arrested for refusing to pay a bribe. We were detained first in Livingston police cells where they stole all of our things, took away our shoes and hooded us, shackled us, chained us, dragged us through to Lusaka, where we were dragged through the streets while we were singing hymns. And then we were thrown into Lusaka Central Prison, which are British built for 80 people, but which are now crammed with more than 1,200, most of whom are remand, haven't had their day in court. Some have been waiting 8 years now. Went to the whole, the whole lot. No plumbing, no electricity, and so on. And the contrast with Kenneth Kaunda's humanist beliefs, and yet how well the British treated him, how badly he's treating his own citizens now. And it makes the time of the British look good in comparison. And I just went, and you could see this woman turning pale, getting absolutely shocked, but she couldn't stop. I didn't give her a pause, and I just related all the things against Kenneth Kaunda. So I did my part, but we helped contribute to the rising discontent and opposition to Kenneth Kaunda's dictatorship. Each day I was able to preach in marketplaces, in open air, street evangelism, and it was a wonderful opportunity organized by a friend, Bishop Bonali Ferry, who had first discovered us in the prison. Bonali Ferry was a Baptist evangelist, and he came as a chaplain to speak at the prison. He saw us, and he is so horrified. Where's your shoes? Where's your clothes? Where's your Bible? And he is just horrified. Do you have soap, toothbrushes? No, nothing like that. Well, he blew the whistle, let it be known that we were locked up there. He let the British Embassy know, so the British Embassy started to bring us some food supplements, because you don't survive on prison food. You need relatives to come and bring food for you each day. And the people in the prison were normally quite well supplied. Some even shared their food with us. All we got from the British Embassy was twice some brown paper packets with a bunch of cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off. And everyone was just apoplectic with laughter. So that's what your British passport gets you. Cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off. I don't know, the British hate the crust, it seems. They've got to cut off the crust. So cucumber sandwiches, crust cut off. That's the only food supplement we got from the British Embassy. Probably after tea time, they said, hey, we've got some chaps in the Lusaka Central. What can we rustle up for them? And, that's all we got, the leftovers of their tea. And that's what the British thought we needed. We weren't getting anything, not vitamins, no toothbrushes, no toothpaste, no soap. Well, the other prisoners were helping us much better than our own embassy did. So Bonali Ferry organized the Lusaka outreach and us getting to prison, and it was actually quite magnificent, ministering in the churches and showing the Jesus film at night to the people in the open areas. Well, the movement became absolutely unstoppable. There was like a tsunami of opposition, and Frederick Chiluba came to power 31st of October 1991 on Reformation Day, and declared Zambia officially a Christian country, and issued a national amendment to the constitution to that effect. We were invited to come and do biblical worldview seminars in schools and teacher training colleges, and we were invited regularly into Zambia as VIPs. So we went from prohibited immigrants to VIPs, because the new government were people who used to be in the Lusaka Central Prison. And now I found myself treated as something of a celebrity, because I'm a Rhodesian who was locked up under KK. And so all over Zambia, we found doors wide open, and people treat us like royalty. It's just amazing, the singing, the enthusiasm, and the fact that I was an opponent of Kenneth Kaunda and that he locked me up is like the best CV you could have in Zambia right now. So they abolished abortion, they banned pornography, they brought the Bible back into schools, Bible translation projects. The commissars were kicked out of the army. Now chaplains were brought in, and we got to minister on the radio and TV. Our good friend Bonali Ferry became our best contact there. We took him all kinds of great books. This is General Godfrey Mianda, who had been locked up as a presidential detainee under Kenneth Kaunda. He became Vice President and Minister of Education, and once I brought him a big pile of books, a whole lot of the good things you can see in our library downstairs, biblical economics, crime and punishment from biblical point of view, all these things. And he groaned. He said, I love reading. I love books, but the demands of office gives me very little time for reading. Don't you have a small book that summarizes all of these? And that was the challenge that led me to produce the Biblical Principles for Africa book, which he bought hundreds of and distributed them to every member of parliament. And so Biblical Principles for Africa, I can particularly thank General Godfrey Mianda. He's the one who challenged me to produce this book. Reverend Olo Stegen did the foreword for it. And this has gone through multiple editions, over 48,000 copies in print, including in Afrikaans and French. And so praise God for General Godfrey Mianda. I spoke to him while I was in Lusaka now, but only by phone, because he's quite sick. And that's gone as far as the Congo, all over Africa. We've helped with producing some Christian textbooks, getting into the villages. Now, to be fair, Frontline never planned to minister in Zambia. When I went there in October 1987, our only goal was to drive through Zambia and get to Malawi, from where we would deploy and minister to Mozambique. But because we were unavoidably detained, the Lord led us to a whole new ministry, and Zambia has become a very important place for us to base our work in, because Zambia is so centrally located, just like the Soviets used to use them under Kaunda to be a base for terrorists to go across the border. Now we are using Zambia as a base of operations for evangelizing and discipling Angola, Congo, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and seminars, conferences, outreaches. I've taken my younger son up during his homeschooling to Zambia and used him to show the fathers how you must teach your children to memorize the scripture. Because he could give the whole evangelism explosion, way the master presentation himself. From the time he's been 6, he's been taking meetings. So I took him up and we drove through Namibia, and I could show, this is where we used to swim across the river in Angola, smuggling in Bibles, and had him taking school assemblies. Made an impact for them to see a little kid of, at this stage he's only 8, giving presentations at assemblies. When I took him to the pastor seminars and showed them you can teach your children to memorize the scriptures, 10 Commandments, Apostles' Creed, and so on. It just takes repetition. It's not difficult. All children soak up these informations easily. Well, General Ronnie Shikapash was another friend. He was at one time head of the Zambian Air Force, a lieutenant general. He was crippled in a car accident, told he'd never walk again. His wife got converted. He got converted. He got healed. He became Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Home Affairs and sometimes Minister of Information. So for years he served in Zambia, and we were able to arrange through him to meet the president. President Levi Mwanawasa had a background in the Jehovah's Witnesses, but the JWs don't allow you to become involved in politics. So because he got involved in politics, he was excommunicated. Well, I got to him shortly after that, and we shared the gospel. I spent an hour with him. We prayed, we read the Bible, presented him a Christian flag. He, shortly after that, got converted, baptized the local Baptist church, and became a member of the local church. Levi Mwanawasa is the one who welcomed ex-Zimbabwe farmers who were kicked out by Mugabe and gave them land in Zambia. And when I met him, the Zambians had just strengthened their currency against the dollar and the pound, first time in history. And I congratulated him. He says, oh, you must thank Mugabe for that. All the farmers that he had kicked out, we invited here. And they've made Zambia food sufficient, and now we can export food, and exchange rates has improved and all this. So he said, yeah, thank you to Mugabe. What he kicked out has turned our economy around. Well, here we're at Livingstone. You can see Livingstone used to be the capital of Northern Rhodesia, by the way. The British chose Lusaka because it was very central to be the capital. It was just a railway siding, not a single hut there. Nobody lived there when the British made it the capital, I think in 1904. And Lusaka today is well over 1 million people, massive. Well, we've had great books donated to us from around the world, which we've taken into Zambia. Even Boxes with Love prepared for the Christian suffering in Zimbabwe that we've often deployed through Zambia. It's hard to get across Bike Bridge with anything, but going up to Zambia and coming down into Zimbabwe, we've used lots of Boxes with Love, great teacher training materials, resources for schools. These yellow bags of gospel recordings, waterproof backpacks for the literature and audiovisual evangelism. You can see our DVD and VCD kits, like you can see in our display cabinets around here. This is the kind of kits being prepared for a team to go into the field and equip a whole lot of evangelists from Zambia to go into the Congo, into Angola, into Mozambique, into Zimbabwe to evangelize. So one of our teams preparing to go on a mission to Zimbabwe, to Zambia. And this is one of the old churches you saw we did evangelism in before, but now it's replaced with a much bigger church. A lot of Zambia's economy takes place on the streets, and many, many people sitting on the streets and selling their wares, eking out an existence. They had a long way to go to climb out of the poverty that socialism takes them in. Many women spend their days smashing rocks into small gravel pieces that they can sell for very little, that people can use for gravel in their roads or maybe to mix with concrete. And this is a living for some people. See the little hammer in her hand? And this person's turning these bigger rocks into small gravel. And that's an income for many families. What's also intriguing is the names you get on some of these buses and trucks. suicide mission, in God we trust. I suppose they go together somewhere. Well, here's a monument to Kwame Nkrumah. Anyone know where Kwame Nkrumah comes from? Ghana. He declared himself the Redeemer. The Redeemer. He is the savior of Africa. He is the Redeemer. He started a personality cult in Ghana. And he got kicked out very shortly thereafter because his people had enough of his delusions and his arrogance. And he was on an overseas speaking tour. He came back and he found he'd been kicked out, and he came back to just be put in jail. Well, Kenneth Kaunda dedicated a monument to Kwame Nkrumah, and the first president of Independent Republic of Ghana, first dictator as well, the first dictator to be overthrown, so there's a lot of firsts with him. Kwame Nkrumah, and the local Zambians say he's waving goodbye to prosperity, to money, to success, to productivity, to health, and all the rest of it. Well, the local Zambians just see Kwame Nkrumah as a local joke. In fact, his economy is very much like this vehicle over here. No engine, no wheels, no chance of going anywhere. And again, the famous freedom statue, breaking the chains. Interestingly, the new Christian government of Zambia started to put out signs to educate people: do not allow beggars to become perpetually dependent on you. Community-based rehabilitation is the answer. Do not give alms to street beggars. It only funds vice, basically. The problem of children on the streets is yours and mine. Don't be left out. Be part of the solution. Discourage begging. Discourage alcohol abuse and drug abuse. And so this is from the Department of Social Welfare. Have you ever seen any responsible signs like this set up in South Africa? I haven't. This, by the way, is a famous tree in Kabwe, Old Broken Hill. And they've actually got a sign here that this large fig tree served as a meeting place. On many occasions during the early years of the township's history, many were the safaris that started out from beneath the trade. The local people called this the slave traders' tree. Now, how do you like how the Kaunda government changed it? The slave traders' caravans taking these people in chains was called safaris. Well, in Swahili, safari is a journey, but I don't think the local people would have thought of it in the same way as people who think of a safari in Kenya today. You know, many were the safaris that start out from beneath the shade. Yeah, that's one way to put it, but it's not very honest. Well, David Livingstone came to Zambia, walked from one side to the other, and proclaimed the gospel, provided people with the first proclamation of the gospel in that country, and healed many lives. And you'll see downstairs, we've got some postage stamps produced by Zambia, framed in the reception area, of Zambia at the anniversary of David Livingstone's death, 100th anniversary of his death, 1973, celebrating the fact that he chased the Muslim slave traders out. And it's got a picture of Livingstone literally chasing the Arab slave traders out of Zambia, which is a good reminder. Unfortunately, many have forgotten what Zambia was preserved from, and today you can see many mosques growing up, and there are families, poor families, who've sold their children into slavery. So they come to a family and say, we can provide free education to your children. And if they learn Arabic very well, they might even get a university bursary to go and study in Mecca or Cairo or something like that. And they just have to sign the kids over to the local mosque. And the local mosques have been found, they found investigations of kids kept in chains and kids forcibly chained in Zambia, beaten. If they speak their own language, Chichewa or Bemba, they've got to speak Arabic, and forced to stand out in the open, holding a brick in each hand, not lowering their hands, or they get whipped. If they do, they've got to only speak Arabic, and they've got to recite the Quran. And these kids are being literally brainwashed, beaten, enslaved. And so the governor of Frederick Chiluba did expose this to Minister of Education, modern day Islamic slavery, and done with the parents' permission. Many businesses run by Arabs, you can see the men lining up outside, pretending to be Muslims, hoping for some charity or to be employed. And the Arabs say, we have jobs, but we can only give it to Muslims. And so in many ways, they are creating rice bowl Muslims, so to speak, where the people are told, if you want charity, if you want a job, you've got to become a Muslim. And so it just shows how important it is that Christians help. and that we should step into the gap. We should be providing good education and help these people. I was there for a demonstration, and interestingly, unlike Coinda's years where they just shot down the protesters, now under the MMD government, people could protest. And in fact, the attitude seemed very relaxed on the side of the police and the army. Yes, they've got tear gas canisters in case of dispersement, but there was no hostility. The local people didn't seem to be afraid of the police. And we were disputing biblical principles for Africa at that event as well. So a good sign of a country when you've got freedom of speech, freedom to protest, and a very happy response at the entrance to Parliament from some of the local people, and meeting many of our good friends in Zambia, real freedom. The roads are in a mess. This is the Great East Road. Under Kunda, nothing had been repaired, but under the new MMD Christian government, they started to repair many of the roads. I mean, can you imagine you're driving down the main road, this is the Great East Road, and there you've got a pick and a shovel standing in the middle of the road, nobody around, but you kind of wonder what is the purpose. Maybe to show we're doing something. Well, sort of towards those two hills there, we've established a frontline fellowship base at Petiuka. The communists used to have terrorist bases based at Petiuka who attacked Rhodesia. We put a Bible college there. We had to hack the road through to there. There was no road established. And we established a covenant college at Petiuka. Can anyone guess what this scripture quote is on the red? If you think about it, you'll be able to interpret it. Well, what phrase in the Bible is repeated 3 times? Only holy, holy, holy. You don't get love, love, love. It's holy, holy, holy. That's what's on that symbol there. So here we had a 3-year program. We found of all the churches in eastern Zambia, there was only one pastor who had Bible college training. So we sent out a Scottish missionary, who was one of our co-workers at that stage, and David Fraser, he set up Covenant College. And it grew and grew and grew, and we sent up teachers like some may remember Rob McCafferty, and running teacher training. This is Pastor David Fraser, who set up the Covenant College, and he was a King James only, Psalms only, ladies must wear hats in church, Scotsman. If we sang a hymn, he would sit in the front row reading a newspaper by way of protest, because he did not believe in singing hymns, only the Psalms. And a real hardcore Scotsman. But anyway, he did a good job with this college. And first graduation service after 3-year training program. And David Fraser is much missed these days. Our good friend Bishop Bonali Ferry and our friend Eugene Kalunga were at the first graduation service. And Covenant College has continued every 3 years to produce a whole lot of graduates and greatly enrich the churches in eastern Zambia. That's the first graduating class. Notice the auntie there from Scotland wearing a hat, because the Scotsmen really love the idea of ladies wearing hats in churches. The library we helped establish, Victoria, one of our co-workers from Minnesota, helping set up the library. And this is the Scottish family, and lovely area. And some of the accommodation was as simple as a caravan that got donated in Cape Town and shipped all the way up there. And then we found a ministry in the hospitals. Many of these hospitals, they're government hospitals, they had huge amounts of medicines. They had, like this hospital, 280-bed hospital, but no one able to sign for the medicines because there's no doctor there. Because all the doctors from this area had moved to Lusaka or gone overseas, or they now work in Canada or Australia or something. So we would get volunteer doctors from the West, like Scotland in this case, to donate their holidays. And they'd come out, and they wouldn't have to build a mission hospital. They could work in a government hospital. They'd even get a salary, and they've got staff, they've got beds, they've got the whole hospital. Just by people in the West who've got medical training, donate their time, the government hospital welcome them in, and they've got the opportunity to reach these people. We were doing evangelism, literature distribution, film evangelism for the patients waiting to be seen. But just by providing a volunteer, how many of our people who are retired doctors in the West could donate a holiday and come and work for a few months in a country like Zambia and make a big difference? Our team's doing literature distribution in the marketplace. Anyone know what type of food this is here? Kapenta. Anyone eaten kapenta? It's like little sardines. Yes, I'm sure Frank's had to eat that. I mean, that's sometimes all you get. And this is sun-dried. And this is like snacking some kind of chips. They're crunchy and so on, because it includes the bones, the tail, the whole lot, teeth. So this kapenta's actual food. They're the little sardines from the lakes that they've harvested, and they've now been sun-dried, and people chomp on these like they chomp on popcorn and chips. Of course, there's always lots of room for children evangelism, a lot of enthusiasm, and we've done Bible college ministry from the beginning. This is World Baptist Evangelistic Association of Bonali Ferry. He'd always organize seminars, and there's so many choirs. Every church got choirs, and what's a choir without choir robes? They have to have choir robes. And some of the people joining in, and it's kind of funny, we'd have this, the one frontline fellowship worker is actually seen clapping and dancing. It was Victoria, but the rest of us were probably standing as stiff as a pole. But anyway, the poor Zambians must have been a bit despairing at our lifeless hymns compared to their joyous choruses that they'd be dancing to. But we managed to introduce them to PowerPoint presentations and Christian films that they'd never seen before. Don't you like those white gloves as well? Doesn't it make you sing better when the choir master's got white gloves on? And many more seminars and conferences. I'll show you this church later, how well decorated it was. But when we first started, it was an old beer hall, Bible Gospel church in Africa, which had been done out. My father-in-law, Bill Bathman, bought the property from the railways, which became Excellence Christian Academy. Eugene Kalunga and his people. By the way, Victoria was kind of very cheeky. She had an FBI t-shirt, firm believer in Christ. FBI, firm believer in Christ. It's, you know, people see FBI and immediately attention's got, so that's a sneaky way of evangelizing. Excellence Christian Academy grew to hundreds of students in the end. It was a great project, Bill Bathman's vision, and we've had joy in trying to support them since. When you see a mowed lawn like that, that's pretty impressive. And we taught them the Evangelism Explosion training program, brought them textbooks, helped the school in many different ways. And I must say, everyone in Frontline used to go to Excellence Christian Academy in Kabwe. Kabwe used to be known as Broken Hill. One of the evolutionary men were found in Broken Hill. A lot of propaganda, but still it put the place on the map. Now it's called Kabwe. So I had people saying to me, the Christian flag is bigger than the Zambian flag. Why is that? I said, because God's kingdom is bigger than Zambia. Oh, no, that's a fact. We're doing Evangelism Explosion presentation here, marching song. And this is a Canadian, Lauren, who worked with us for some time. And Lauren Gilderman was a very effective missionary. Could use more Canadians like that. Feel sorry for him, locked up there in the prison, the sort of Cuba of the North up there. Tim was another American volunteer, worked with us for years, did good work. And Eugene Kalunga, the principal of Excellence Christian Academy. Here we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of the school. And in the evening, they had a Bible school that met night school. But often, to show you how fast the church is growing in Africa, you're often teaching in a building site. They haven't yet painted, plastered, or put in the windows yet, but this is the sign of a healthy, growing church. The church is growing so fast in Africa, we can't keep up with the buildings, can't even keep up with the Bibles. So this is World Baptist Evangelistic Association, another Bible college. This is, I think, Morning Star Bible College, run by a South Korean missionary. And I think this is the Apostolic Faith Mission Bible College. another night school Bible college in Lusaka, Christian Voice Bible College, and they have a big radio station broadcasting shortwave radio throughout Africa, very far and wide. Evangelists coming and getting equipped, gospel recordings materials, and our team and our bucky at that stage. That's before we got a much better four-wheel drive. This is a good picture to use when you need fundraising for your team's vehicle. Yeah, I got the impression this wasn't our vehicle, but it just looked good. A bit like driving a socialist car. Another, this is now secular school or college. As you can see, everything's been stripped. There's nothing there. This is what a government university looks like. And in the teacher training colleges, we would come and offer them various books. And I got into the practice of trying to produce a new book every year, so that on each speaking tour we could be distributing that book, whether it's the Discipleship Handbook, Biblical Principles for Africa, Reforming Our Families, Great Essential Missions, and so on. People coming forward to sponsor literature tables. You know, it's a bit discouraging in a Western country. You can tell people there's literature, and maybe one or two people look. But in Africa, you let people know about literature table, they storm it. There's such enthusiasm. It's so great for literature ministry to see people who want to read. And the Zambians love books. Eugene Kalunga of Excellence Christian Academy getting more books for his library. Now, some of these churches would have all sorts of ribbons and so on, decorating the place to show the enthusiasm that they've got guests. So it's not unusual to be in a place where it looks like, sometimes it looks like they've decorated the church with toilet paper, but anyway, it just shows a kind of festive spirit. Colorful flowers, in many cases fake flowers, probably came from China as well. One of our good friends in Lusaka is the Coptic Orthodox Church for the See of St. Mark. Good people, John Banoop, and this is a mission station from Egypt. So these are Egyptian Coptic missionaries who've got a clinic and a church in Lusaka. And such a joy to minister with them. If I'm sick in Lusaka, that's where I'd want to go. To these Coptic Egyptians, I think they've got some of the finest doctors and pharmacists around. And they're well respected. Good work that they're doing. And you can see Egyptian missionaries and Zambian congregation. Some of our frontline seminars that we've done up there, we've run many a leadership training course from different mission bases. This is World Baptist Evangelistic Association. Their fraternal of evangelists to go across the border into all the neighboring countries. And Bonali Ferry in the middle and his team of evangelists. He's got 70 evangelists that he's supporting, that we're equipping, that work throughout Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique. Some even go to Angola and the Congo. And then afterwards receiving their books and booklets, evangelistic kit, chaplains coming for books for them, slavery, terrorism, Islam books in this case. Frontline hymn books being distributed up there, evangelism training programs. And here's a South Korean missionary who's running this Morning Star Bible College. Wonderful to see other countries like South Korea taking the initiative to send out missionaries. Bonali Ferry's very busy office. He's got such vision. He was brought up where I was brought up in Bulawayo and Madabili land. Speaks Madabili, speaks Shona, and of course he's based in Zambia now, but he's got a big burden for reaching out to Zimbabwe because that's where his father worked and where he was brought up. So on this occasion we provided food for him to take to people who are starving in Zimbabwe. And here we're providing food and other things for the prisoners in Lusaka Central Prison, everything from Dettol, training, Bible study training programs, and lots of good food and so on for them. Helping the people in Zimbabwe during the worst times of the drought under Mugabe. Bonali Ferry preaching in Bulawayo, and evangelistic church planting where they only have a tent. And here is where the Ministry of Defense operates in Lusaka, and where we managed to meet cabinet ministers for outreaches, different books, meeting with the President, State House, which used to be where Satan would come and meet with Kohinda and Mugabe and Chosana and all those characters. And now it's where they have Christian presence, which makes a nice change. And Levi Mwanawasa with a Christian flag. Some of the radio stations like Christian Voice ministering by radio, and Christian Voice here has strong shortwave radio connectivity with all of Africa, and always a favorite stop to minister with them. Radio Phoenix, also on FM. This is the Zambian national TV broadcasting place. Back in 2008, I drove my son up across Namibia and the Golden Highway to get into Zambia, across the Zambezi River, and lots of memories of good old times. Zambia's been putting up new statues to Livingstone. They're not pulling down statues, they're putting more up. This one was put up in 2005 on the 150th anniversary of Livingstone naming and mapping Victoria Falls. So that's on the Zambian side. And Victoria Falls is so inspiring. And such a mighty, millions and millions of litres coming over every minute. And we'd be so soaked, even without going in the water. If we jumped in the Zambezi, we couldn't have got more wet than the mist had made us. Even down to your boots, your socks, totally soaked. Zambezi River, you just think of when David Livingstone came there, and he crawled to the edge and let down a weighted string to measure how high it was, 310 feet high. And that's what it is, that's accurate. He measured across 1,680 feet, is it? And he's dead right. And so on. How do you measure a waterfall? And of course, there's always the rainbow. And on the other side, Zimbabwe. Now this reminded me, when I was a 12-year-old boy, I came to Victoria Falls, I stood at the Zambezi, and I looked across at Zambia with horror. There's the enemy. I can never stand on that side, on the northern side of the Zambezi River. And to think, several years later, I'm over there with my son, we're looking south at Zimbabwe and thinking, when will we be allowed to stand on that side of the Zambezi again? Interesting how things change. When I went to Zambezi River first, the Zambian security forces had just shot 2 Canadian girls dead, a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old girl. They were shot just because they were white. They didn't know they're Canadian. They shot them because they're so hyped up with hostility by Kenneth Kunda's speeches. And they never managed to recover one of the bodies that fell down Victoria Falls. But that sort of gets in you. And I never thought I'd stood in Zambia, let alone be an official guest in the country. Here's a model showing you the different ravines around Victoria Falls, the Livingstone Museum, and a wild cat that we woke up to, opening up our whiskers, cat food. We always take food for strays. And we woke up to hearing this crackling, and the cat had used his bag opener, master key, the claws. And so we woke up seeing this cat was feeding himself happily that night. Of course, you've got to sleep under your mosquito nets. We would just camp out normally with these dome tents. And there's wildlife around in some of these areas. Some of the feeding programs done by Bible Gospel Church in Africa. And people being helped in different ways. Dr. Peter Ndlovu was one of our board members, good friend of Bonali Ferry. And he turned this beer hall into a wonderful church building facility and helped us in launching Africa Christian Action in Zambia, Bible Gospel Church in Africa, and what they call a Holy Ghost Center, a house of prayer for all nations. And we've had many a seminar there. My son made such an impact, they brought Zambia National TV over to film him giving the gospel presentation, which they thought amazing that a youngster that age could recite a gospel presentation that was broadcast on national TV. Another school assembly in the morning, and once Calvin was missing, I went looking for him and I found him. He'd walked into a preschool classroom and he'd started just teaching him, and the poor teacher just stood back and let this boy carry on. And, well, I mean, you can't exactly rebuke kids for taking initiative. These are different Bible cultures we've ministered in over the years. A good friend, Ronnie Shikapashwa, My wife was horrified when she saw this picture. She said, how could you take him in to meet the Minister of Foreign Affairs dressed like that? And he wore the same trousers the whole trip, I think, and it looks a bit sloppy. But when we walked in through security, he had a big Rambo-type naval knife on his belt, sheath knife. And the policeman said, oh, toy knife. And Calvin immediately turned with no, and I put my hand over his mouth, kept walking. Let them think it's a toy knife, that's fine. But he walked in with his massive big Rambo dagger, and as you can see on the one side, the knife there. Don't know where he got the idea from to walk around with knives and so on his belt, but there we go. Can you imagine cycling with that many eggs? But the people are entrepreneurs. You've got to be an entrepreneur to survive in a country we've got thieves as government officials. You can see from the candles, you could have power failures up there, and you'd have to sometimes minister by candlelight. And this is Lusaka Baptist Church, which Levi Mwawasa joined and was baptized there. On this occasion, we were just giving a missions conference, and some of the homes we stayed in. This is where Kenneth Kunda used to meet with his unit people. He used to wave his white handkerchief around and weep and wail about the evil Rhodesians. This is called, I think, Mulungushi, which basically means there is no other God, which some say could mean there is no God, or we are God. But that was where UNIP rallies were held. Let me get through some more of these. Great times, lots of memories of different events and people, ministries. Bishop Reuben Wale, who's one of our hosts now, he did our Great Commission course many years ago, and he launched a lot of ministries since then. And other good friends and Bonali Ferry's people. Just Mali Theological University College is where I was staying recently on this last mission, and nice people, built by the Dutch Reformed Church, handed over now to the Reformed Church of Zambia. And we've had many a seminar, we've had conferences there, Reformation conferences, donated tons of books, ministered there on different occasions, including 2017 for the Reformation 500 event, Zambia National TV. This is Cairo Road. I know people who were in the reconnaissance commander who had sabotage missions against the ANC headquarters in Cairo Road, Freedom House, who were being chased by Zambian police down this road with guns blazing. And, you know, Cairo Road's quite famous in the South African Army's memory. And the war memorial from the Second World War, because Northern Rhodesians were deployed to fight for Britain. And now the Ministry of Defense is in that building. The separate entrance for the president at the National Airport. Got to own. Here's the Freedom Monument, and behind it is a building built by the Chinese for UNIP, but UNIP never got to use it because they got thrown out before the building was complete. Ghastly buildings, but this is the kind of thing China builds. Nothing in it works. Lord be my savior. Well, that's a good name on the back of a taxi. Vote for Jesus, how's that? That's pretty good. Victory in Jesus. So you can see some of them have a different kind of taxi culture than we've got in Cape Town. And this is the beer hall that was turned into Bible Gospel Church in Africa. And it's quite an amazing church now. It looks quite spectacular. It's called the House of Prayer for All Nations. It's a nice name for any church. And we've had many a Christian Action Network meeting there, launched Christian Action Network there in this Bible Gospel Church, and you can see how it's changed from when it was a beer hall. Can you imagine? Isn't it a great idea to take over a beer hall and turn it to a church? And yeah, we've had many friends there, launched many a seminar. It was always a place for frontline rallies. They would often on Friday night have an all-night prayer meeting, and apparently that's still continuing to this day. Distributing books to participants in a Christian Action rally. Some of the people with their books and with different flags that they're identifying with. Evangelists of Bible Gospel Church in Africa. And so these are some of the people we should be remembering and praying for. And Bishop Peter Ndlovu and his people. they've got these thrones up front where the people are meant to sit. And I must say, it's a bit disconcerting. When you begin a service, they've got people who come and kneel in front of you, and they're the ushers. And they want to take your bag, your handbag, whatever it is. They want to carry my backpack, although the poor guy struggles to pick my backpack up. I wouldn't let anyone carry my backpacks normally, but I wanted to show him when he said he'll carry it. I thought, this weedy little character, what makes him think he can carry my bag better than I can? So I let him try. But at the end of the service, they ask the whole congregation to stand. Then they come, they stand in front of you, and they take your bags, and then they escort you down in like a processional while everyone's standing and waiting. Peter Ndlovu, the founder of the Bible Gospel Church in Africa, turned into a massive denomination in Zambia, which is quite an extraordinary achievement. Don't you like all the gold? I like all the flags, personally. I found the gold there a bit distracting. But the flowers have been beautifully arranged. People take church very, very seriously there. And I always found it a bit strange, all these tables, and you have iced water brought for you to drink, and you see the cameramen all set up there. So that's Bible Gospel Church in Africa in Materu. And you can't turn out in these churches dressed like we do in our average churches. You must dress up in your very best. I think it's a rebuke to how the Western churches have gotten sloppy. The ministers there take it very seriously. And there's so many churches around, you go there, and they're still building the church. There's so much growth that you can be in a church and preach, and they haven't built the roof yet. They haven't put windows, there's no flooring done. But it just shows growth. And they've got vision for the future. They're building much bigger than they are using yet now, because they've got a vision of church growth. And this just reminds us the church in Africa is growing in leaps and bounds. And we need to grow with that vision. And that's what we're trying to do with the Africa Christian Network and Literature for Africa, provide Bibles and Bible teaching to help the people who are trying to respond to the Great Commission. It's quite inspiring to speak in a church where they don't even have a roof. But you don't always think of putting on sun cream when you're about to preach that Sunday morning. And you can get quite sunburnt. Yeah, walking in covenant with God. That's the theme for the year. I've seen many churches have got a banner up in Zambia with the theme for the year. And I presume they expect all the sermons of that year to be in line with that theme in one way or another. But it's a good idea to have a theme and remind yourself of, how we're growing each year from strength to strength. And again, notice frequently there's uniforms for the choir in particular. I think we can learn a lot from how these folks dress and how they conduct their services. I've been campaigning for a long time that you shouldn't just have a water pump, and we've built quite a few water pumps. You need a concrete lip around it, because you've often got the chickens and the dogs scratch around the mud to drink. How they to manage, and you just breed mosquitoes. So you must put in a bit of extra money when you do a water pump, and put a concrete lip for the water to drain away, and preferably into a bigger drainage area that the goats and chickens have somewhere to drink the water in a clean format. Because often these water pumps are just surrounded by mud and mosquitoes and disease. So I think that extra bit of effort makes a big difference. Sometimes the meetings are home meetings, which expand so much that they go into the garden and people gather outside. And again, it just shows the church growth is so intense that the biggest problem they've got is not enough accommodation, not enough chairs and so on. People might even bring chairs from their home to add. But there's a house meeting that just grew out of control. Too many guests that day. And these are nice problems to have. Always we want to go with literature, so taking the people lots of good books. The people read, signing people up for our Christian Action Network. These are some of the seminars and opportunities we've had to run over the years, and more people gathering, some of the books being distributed. We have authors donating books to us that we can then give to the people on the ground, like The Battle for Truth and One Thing You Can't Do in Heaven, One Heartbeat Away. And then we would often have boxes prepared on this side by Literature for Africa with orders. Different people had ordered different books. So here we're able to carry it up by vehicle, and the people who maybe they're not even at the meeting, but friends nearby can take, this is the package addressed to this chap, Joel Kapasa, maybe at Japata and so on, and somebody will get it to him. So that's part of our postal service. Bonali Ferry, our longest standing friend in Zambia. Now he had said to me years ago, Peter, when I die, I want you to take my funeral. So I reminded him of it when I was up there, and he says, I might be speaking at your funeral. You know? He says, what makes you think I'm going to go first? And I like that spirit. I mean, here the man is in his 70s now, and he's talking about outliving me. That's pretty good. That's a good attitude. Well, he's got a school in this area as well, and every time I go, I'm always amazed to see this whole museum around, seeing pictures from how many different outreaches, so many people we know, and flags, visions. Woolgum, you heard of Woolgum? World Gospel Ministries? There's so many initiatives going on. You can just see Christianity in Zambia is so dynamic, it's so diverse, so energetic, and I think you could say that about Nigeria as well. There's just a phenomenal amount of different ministries growing, and these people have such a lot of enthusiasm. We need to support them and provide them with leadership training, love and action, literature. That's the big challenge. Well, Zambia for Christ our vision. I was welcomed at the airport by a whole delegation of pastors, including Bishop Reuben Wale and his team. Justin here was my chauffeur while I was there. I decided this time to travel with a hiking stick, and everywhere I was called old man. I've never been called old man so much. And people would say old man, and introducing the elderly, Dr. Peter Hammond, and I don't know if that's because of the walking stick, but I like the idea of having a hiking stick. It's a good weapon that you can travel by plane with. If you've got grey hair, you get away with it. But everywhere I was called old and old man, which I presume is polite in Zambia. It wouldn't be in America or South Africa. One of the first schools we ministered in, called Antioch School. What a good Christian name. What's the importance of Antioch? In the Bible it says, at Antioch, the believers were first called Christians. Antioch was one of the great missionary sending churches in the Bible. Well, then we had a pastors' fraternal. This was actually a Christian Action Network seminar and conference. It launched the whole vision, and people enthusiastic, very enthusiastic, had to join this Africa Christian Network. The Ministry of Defense, Chaplain General, asked us if we could please help them establish a Livingston Missionary Training School. And there's the chaplain in charge of the army, he's of the whole defense force, and then we've got Bishop Bonali Ferry. Because we help train the chaplains of the Sudanese People's Liberation Army, the SPLA in Sudan, and we equip them with Bibles and bicycles and Bible media, audio Bibles like we have there. Did chaplains work in the field and launched the Chaplains Corps of South Sudan, what became the South Sudan Army. And with our background of working with Renamo in Mozambique and UNITA in Angola, we've produced chaplains' handbooks over the years, chaplains' prayer books, and now we've got the chaplains' handbook, which is not only a handbook for Sudanese chaplains, but hopefully can be for Zambia as well. This is what the Bible Gospel Church in Africa looks like now, and ministering amongst the people today. The World Baptist Christian Community School. Bonali Ferry said that this school was started by one of our female missionaries, I think Lynn, with just 12 students, and now they've got over 280. So this is his mission station in Lusaka. Notice he's got a picture of Bill Bathman over his office door. I thought that was very nice. And many of his students, he says some of their students have ended up being teachers and nurses. Quite an inspiring growth of this little mission station in Lusaka. Bonali Ferry has built it up, and we're able to teach them the Evangelism Explosion program. This is the Pastors Fraternals, where we have a lot of the people enthusiastic. Edge TV, which is one of the Zambian stations that we were able to speak on, and One Love radio station, radio call-in show. We've got the latest Gospel Defense League newsletter on the Olympic scandal. available on the table by the door. Any questions at all on Zambia and Congo? Taking a trip down memory lane. I don't know if anyone here, aside from Frank, remembers many of the people in these places, but still, it's a lot of memory for me. Any questions at all on either Zambia or the Congo? Frank?
Do you believe they upgraded from thatch to tin?
Where?
Well, it looks like the soccer and that. A lot of tin.
Yeah, I think they probably started corrugated iron in the soccer, but in the countryside, thatch would have been all that was available, I would imagine. Any other questions?
Thank you, Peter, for the feedback. Would you say that you encountered more of the positive men standing for God truly than the false prophets? Or did you find
I don't think any of the false prophets would invite me or be happy to have me around anyway. These people are not the health and wealth prosperity bunch, as you can see. Most of them are pretty humble locations, but the people who are happy to receive me would be those who are only interested in the simple, straightforward gospel or the reformed position. I would have no attraction to these big name evangelists and their name it, claim it, and frame it crowd. I tend to speak against that too, so I don't think I met any of those false prophets at all.
No, you just get a sense that Zambia is a lot better off in that regard than, say, like Nigeria.
I would think so, yes, very much. I've been to Nigeria too, and yes, over there I'd say they have many gimmicks they've picked up from TV and, TB Joshua and all those characters. So Nigeria's got a lot of fly-by-night scams. Zambia's a lot more serious, and you can see there's real solid Christianity on the ground, which gives you hope for the future. But it's an exciting project that we may be training chaplains at Livingston, which is what a beautiful, wonderful venue to be close to Victoria Falls and Zambezi River. Be training chaplains, hopefully from other countries too. That's a large part of the vision of Africa for Christ. If we can train the chaplains, and that's police, prisons, chaplains, army chaplains, the possibilities are vast. And remember also in the army, in Africa today, many of the army officers may end up being next governments, the way things go. You get destabilized, corrupt governments and often replaced. So to reach the soldiers for Christ is extremely strategic. To reach the prisoners is also strategic because many of the prisoners of today are going to be the governments of tomorrow too. So you might as well reach them while you can. Captive audience.
Was there any, or did you encounter any soda in your pocket bribes? Like the norm?
Attempts at bribery. That's an interesting point to bring that up. I didn't come across much attempts at bribery. I had a few minor little attempts which we just brushed off. But in the past, we'd come across bribery everywhere. Now in the Congo, non-stop bribery and corruption. And Paul Johannes already said it's like non-stop. They're trying to suck the life out of every friend and visitor to the country. And you got these bribe-hungry officials at roadblocks. No flags, no uniforms, no IDs, no name tags, but there's just people all over the place. He once in 1 kilometer came across 5 roadblocks, all demanding bribes. So they can't even be all official. So Congo is one non-stop bribathon.